Today is the 25th of April 2014 and I'm talking to Jim Rogers and Joan Rogers. Okay, alright, I just wanted to ask first of all, Jim, could you tell me what was your role in the town at the time of the start of the strike?
I was a local councillor.
Yeah.
I've been elected in 1984. The trade union presence in the Labour Party then was a lot more effective and a lot more of a presence. And it very, very quickly became apparent from general committee meetings, or the old GC meetings, that this strike, which was coming, was really massively vital for a lot of reasons. I mean, not the least for the mine workers, but also for the message it carried for all the other sections of the trade union movement. And that, broadly speaking, that realisation, I think, was what triggered the activity that subsequently followed in Harlow. We didn't, as far as I can recall, actually come across any real opposition. I mean, some incidents that rise in industrial relations, you can get a really sort of vitriolic backlash. But I don't recall anything of that nature. There might have been a few people who turned their backs when we were...
Was that within the Labour Party or was that within the town generally?
No, within the Labour Party, it wasn't a problem.
Right.
When we were out and about, knocking along the doors, we made up some little leaflets for anything whatsoever that people wanted to donate, be it clothing, foodstuffs, or stuff for women's needs or whatever. I don't believe anybody ever said, stick that up your jacksie, mate, a load of bullshit miners and all the rest of it. I personally don't recall, but it's 30 years ago, I honestly don't recall coming across. No doubt there were somewhere, but attitudes like that. But there again, in any strike situation, there always appears to be people anyway.
How did the support group come about then? How did that start?
It was mostly come about on the initiative of about 2 or 3 people. I wasn't particularly one of them, but we had the likes of Ian Turner, who was very much involved. I think, as far as I can recall, I'm not sure who. The Trades Council particularly did obviously get involved quite a lot. Ian and Chris, I've forgotten Chris's surname, because she had been married to Bob Hickey, but she had dropped.
Huxtable?
No, Chris Huxtable was the
union
Nalgo,
yes,
as it
that's
was
right.
then,
Sorry,
Nalgo
yes, of course,
steward.
that's right.
Chris, it might have done. I know she dropped her married name and reverted back to her single name. But her and Ian, who were working together, they had a lot of drive and energy, and there are also other people who got up, and it kind of grew from that. The ideas were just put forward. What can we do? And Judy and Howard Chan were very much involved, because they had got to a point where people were being invited. I don't know how we formed the connection with Hucknall and Limby Colliery, but after a period of time, people were invited down to Harlow for a break more than anything else, and so on. And there were like social evenings organised, and that all added to the momentum of it, and it grew out of that. I wasn't conscious of the group actually having a what we would now sort of recognise as a structure as such.
Right.
it seemed that, right, let's do this, and we did, and the idea that we needed to collect stuff, that grew, and we collected it, and I know that there were other comrades, colleagues, who were loading up vehicles and actually taking it up there. And there were vehicles, as far as I can recall, I may not be too clear about this, that actually came down and picked up stuff and took it back. Myself and Bob Ickey, who was very well involved in the Labour Party in those days, retired now, and so on, we become aware that there was a shortage of fuel. It sounds a bit odd from the miners, but there was. And people poked about around the council structure, and it became apparent that the tree gang, who the depot used to be towards Old Harlow, down Gildon Way there, that the tree gang were busily at the time doing Copperson and God knows what else, and their yard was getting absolutely chocker with logs and stuff. Right. So an approach was made, and yes, they would be very pleased to get rid of it. So the next thing was that the council depot, what's now where Mothercare, not Mothercare, the other one, Toys R Us is, had got a fairly large lorry, a sort of a tipper thing, and a trailer and all the rest of it. So we approached the general manager at Harry Platt, or I think it was Harry Platt, and it was, and said to him that I had HGV licences and all the rest of it from my fire brigade days. They were still current and so on. Could we borrow the lorry and load it up with all the as much as we could and take it up to Hucknall? Anyway, Harry was quite happy. He wrote us a letter to take to the manager of the council depot, that to add my name to the list of the council's insured drivers and all the rest of it. And so we got to about 3-4 of us maybe, got together, and on the appointed day we took it round, loaded it up. I think it was loaded up the day before, as far as I can recall. And then we simply drove it up there. I think it was a weekend, a Friday or something like that. I can't remember the actual day. But anyway, we got ourselves up to Hucknall, and we found the miners' welfare place, and so, went in, and there was people there because they were using it as their base really. And said, "Where do you want this lot?" Right, and they come out and said, "Oh, we better take that round to Terry's." Terry, whose name I can't for the life of me remember, but he had a house with a bit of frontage.
Is that the guy on the table?
That was, as it turns out. We met him over the weekend.
Oh, really?
Again. Oh, yeah, I only remember. That's the bloody wall
Never
going.
forgotten it.
He never forgot it. Because we turned up with this truck and its trailer, and outside his house, and the idea was to just sort of tip it, and it seemed that the gate was slightly narrower than the lorry was, so after giving it a little nudge, we got back out of there, and they said, well, he's got an allotment just down the road, round the corner. So we took it down there, and I'm afraid rather sort of backed up to the hedge and tipped it over the hedge onto his allotment, which at the time I think was probably about a few yards of spuds and cabbages or something underneath it all. It was a fair old tonnage. It went over there, and we obviously found our way back to the miners' welfare, where I think the trailer, which had been, I think we'd left it there because it was full of all the other stuff, and that has been unloaded into the welfare. And anyway, we was there for a few hours and met a lot of people and so forth. And then I don't know, quite late in the evening, headed back back to Harlow. But that was, you know, just one of our experiences. My daughter, so we can encourage Julie to come on board. Her and her then partner, who's gone, so I won't mention him too much because he's turned out to be a bit of an arseache, I think, to say the trade. Well, we'll talk to her. But they,
he was instrumental at the start.
yeah, he was, yeah. What was his name?
Graham Bell.
Graham Bell. I mean, on the other side of it, organised the youngsters, which was very good. Our daughter 30 years ago would be in late teens, wouldn't she, I suppose?
Oh, so.
Yeah.
Young socialists.
Yeah, they were, but, and so on. There was a whole group of them who got stuck in organising benefits. And the old AUEW Hall was a favourite venue. I think one or two got done at the square as well. But off the back of that came Davy Lamp Records, which the room we're sitting in at the moment became their warehouse for a time. Because I was like, "Oh, Dad, can I borrow the car? What do you want it for?" We want to go down to some Sterling Industrial Estate, I think it was, at Dagenham or something like that, where the records.
That's one of the records.
Oh, there's one of them. Yeah. The record has now been produced. They recorded it up in Islington, didn't they? Just off Essex Road, Islington, I think it's Cross Street. There was a studio there. The recording was done there, and then I call it the master went to this other place, and we had a full called team at the time, and that found it went down to the warehouse. I'm afraid it come back rather like that going up the road, right? You know, it was well overloaded anyway, and it was unloaded into here, and this basically became a big stack in the middle of the room. Became the Davy Lamp Records Harlow branch warehouse, and I was amazed really, but they all went. They all went. I imagine that somewhere, someone probably. I've never seen them on eBay, but I dare say, they are.
Julie must have our Not Just Man for another one, but they're the two.
Yes,
singles.
I remember when I was studying
That's
up in
the one that
Middlesbrough.
Steve drew it, so
Yeah, that's right. I remember going into a record shop in Middlesbrough and I saw the Not Just Mandela album on sale there.
I was looking for it, it's not there. So I should
Steve lives just down the alleyway. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
that's
right. Might be worth talking to Steve.
Right, yeah.
Okay. So, what about in terms of the workplaces in Harlow? Was there support for the miners in the local workplaces?
As far as I can recall, the Trades Council was quite active in those days. We had the likes of Dave Barham and I think Alan Jones and company was still, I think it was still involved with the trade union movement. People over at Key Glass and so forth. I can't speak totally for them, but I never heard of them actually meeting any really serious, go away, etc. I think most of the organised workplaces either collected money. I believe the fire service had a collection on a sort of a monthly basis or something like that, and I think, as far as I can recall, a lot of the factories. People were bunging in the fire bobs and so on, functions, what's that, the latest 25p, silly. But there was a regular.
It was.
Yeah, as far as I can recall, there was regular support, and as far as I can recall, it lasted throughout the period. I mean, when it tapered off, I think towards the end, which is reasonably natural of most disputes. Apparently, when people were returning to work, despite the union and the NUM wanting to stay out, on the book I showed you earlier, which is based in and around Nottingham. They have got some really straight talking type paragraphs in there, and even today, 30 years on, there are relationships which fractured then and have never will ever. Yeah, I mean, it was in families. It was fathers, sons going back to work or whatever. Fathers or one or the other, splits like that. And there's in the book it quotes instances where many years later, groups of the miners would meet in one of their gatherings, and someone would propose that after 8 years or 10 years or whatever, perhaps we should readmit to our circle so and so. But I don't believe it ever happened. I know there's instances in the book where they said, like, that X person who had done whatever, crossed the picket line, broken the golden rule, never ever got back into the local community and died, like ostracised all those years later. So those scars, like they ran deep, and they're still there today. Like.
Do you know how many miners came to the town and how often they came down at all?
It was at least on 2 or 3 occasions. We've got some photographs, which you're welcome to look at. There's some photographs of the miners support gatherings.
Oh, right.
I mean, if you want to borrow them, Paul, but in that other.
We do need to copy them.
No, there's a piece of paper with other photos on it.
I mean, it's hoped eventually to sort of organise a display of all the things that are...
Well, these pretty much 3 photographs all taken at the same time. This was a gathering at the Leah Manning Centre. Now, that's the names of a lot of the miners who are in. And that's the menu for a meeting we had like a few weeks back. And that picture was actually taken. That's in the middle of it. You've got John Hobbs.
Oh yeah.
Right, and he's got a presentation in his hands, and that lump of coal that's in there was apparently the first lump of coal that came out of Limby Colliery after the strike. Was over, so that is a party which obviously were invited down to Harlow, obviously to give them a break, and it was very, very soon after the strike was over, and that's what they brought for Harlow in gratitude, right, for the support they've got, and the chairperson of the council there. As far as I can make out, the support was pretty genuine. Stuff was given without malice or arm twisting. And there's other photographs we got of other social evenings where people came down.
Did the council itself then play a role in the strike, or with the support group or anything?
Well, in as much as the support for the miners wasn't hindered or questioned in any way, bearing in mind that quite a few of the Labour councillors were involved in it, and organising and so on. The council pretty well compliant with whatever we asked. I mean, some of these pictures are in the Leah Manning Centre, which was Harlow Town's council's own. It's not now, but and as far as I can recall, there was no cost or charge attached to those. The Ways and Means Act was applied, right, and etc. I mean, you always get the elements, the odd elements, who were not as enthusiastic about getting involved as others.
Yeah.
But by and large,
there was no hostility amongst the councillors or anything?
No, I can't recall. Maybe other people may have had a different experience, but I personally can't
recall
recall.
that. Okay.
Because most of the leading lights of the Labour Party, I mean, guys like Ian Turner, Charlie Cochrane and others. Chris Paradine, that's why that was Chris who organised with Ian. I mean, even like the late Roy Collier and Ralph Rowlands, all councillors, were all out on the knocker, dishing out the leaflets, and then going round a few days later, collecting. I mean, Alan Jones, who lives down Tenzing Road there, he was a councillor at the time. Bill Handley, who's no longer with us, poor old Bill, he was very enthusiastic.
What they went door to door and knocked on houses and asked people for donations, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean that was the way things were done. So we got, not sure I've got a copy somewhere, I have somewhere, of the little leaflet which this ward, Passmore's ward as it was, we made, photocopied, and we went round, just knocked on doors, or put them through letter boxes, didn't get an answer, and then give it about 3 or 4 days and just went round again saying, well, did you receive our little leaflet we put through, you know, in support of the mine workers and everything else? And a lot, surprisingly, quite a few people said, oh, we was waiting for you to come back and give you like an old Sainsbury's bag or something with some clothing and bits and pieces in and anything at all, you know, because we said, like, we'll take anything, foodstuffs or baby food, whatever, you know, and so forth. And I mean, other doors you knocked at, you never got an answer, but that, you know, was pretty normal. But that went on a pretty regular basis.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't every week or that sort of thing, but more often than not, throughout the course of the period, like, you know, quite a lot of that.
What about when the miners came to the town? Do you know what they were doing, what their role was? Were they going to other places and picketing, like the power stations
Well,
and stuff?
the trade unions, as far as I can recall, invited people to come and address their branch meetings.
Right.
Others did come down and were kind of in transit, as far as I know, because they were going to Tilbury Power Station to talk to the people down there, the union officials and so forth. I wasn't close to it, but I just knew that, that you know, a group of miners had come down. They were staying with, I don't know, Julian Howard had people stay with them, didn't they?
Yeah, because the couple they went to stay with up there.
Yeah, because so when we went up there a few weeks ago, they actually went and stayed with them.
Oh, did they?
Well, they've been up there before,
They come down.
but yeah, but they would come down, and I know that others came down and stopped over in Harlow while they went up to London to lobby the TUC or whatever was going on. And I know some definitely come down with the intention of going along to Tilbury Power Station, putting the case and so on.
What about the role sort of women locally as well? Because there was an active women's support group, I believe, in
Very
Nottingham.
much so, and that's where I think Chris Paradine sort of was leading the charge, as it were.
People like Pat Larkin.
Yeah, Pat Larkin and
their daughters at the time.
Oh, right,
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they both Pat's daughters were involved very much with the benefits, and see some of his other photographs. You can see them. You can see them, you know, in the pictures with the entertainment and the little Dave, who was
the poet,
the poet, and so on.
Oh,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah. Huh.
I mean, that's Pat's daughter there.
Oh
yeah, it's got Graham and Lorna Hanscom.
Because they're in the photos, aren't they?
Oh, they are, yeah, they're in some of these shots.
That was a benefit gig.
Half the time you didn't realise who
Yeah, Austin Shirts.
Austin
That was
Shirts,
the
yeah.
one of the
That's Gary,
Gary New. Yeah.
Gary Noon,
Gary Noon.
I
Yeah.
think his name is.
Yeah.
Julie knows him.
Well, they were all part of the same.
Well, Julie played the
Oh,
cello
this is,
on their,
Ian
on one of
Turner
their tracks, didn't she?
and Chris
Oh
Paradigm
yeah.
and
that
with
Milo?
Tony Edwards.
Tony Edwards was it? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah, he's another one to speak to, isn't he?
Yes.
yeah. Or Mandy Jacobs.
Yeah.
You know, they're all. Because there was a very active women's section of the Labour Party then.
Right.
Oh, Lorna and Graham
Yeah.
and Joan, of course, was.
Have you spoken to Judy and Howard yet?
No, not yet.
Did
No.
you see the,
No, I haven't.
the card that they made? And they sent it as a Christmas card at the time, but that was Jonathan, their son, and Howard.
Oh, someone else you might recognise. Daniel Pertler Squire.
Oh yeah.
Where's old Bill Hanley? Right there, that's John Huxtable. It was Christine Huxtable's
Oh yeah.
husband. He's his drummer,
Yeah.
and so on.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Oh, well, I think that's. Is that Mandy Jackson? I think so,
Mandy
Mandy.
Jacobs, yeah, looks like it.
I mean, this is down at.
yeah, because she used to be theatre band.
Everyone looks young there.
Oh yeah.
And that was the card that Jonathan made. Is that right?
Jonathan and Howard. Yeah, I think Jonathan.
I was Jean Clark and Pat
Oh yeah.
Larkin.
Oh, okay.
That's Gabby.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, in the middle.
Gabby Pritchard.
Mm.
Okay. All right, lovely. Yeah, crikey. Okay. All right then.
Oh, one or two you might recognise in that one.
Certainly should.
Oh my goodness, look at that. Wow.
And Harry Talbot.
Yeah, with Harry
Oh,
Talbot.
Harry's right. Yeah, Harry's not too well nowadays. He's
No,
quite
no, I
frail,
heard.
isn't
I heard he's not that good.
Quite fine,
Okay.
he? Oh, the Reverend. See on the wall behind, supported by the Reverend Dennis Nady. She, I've forgotten her name. She was a councillor,
Right.
and that's her husband there. Who?
Dennis
Glenys?
Hayden's in the picture, did you say?
Fascinating, yeah.
Dennis. Dennis Nady.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I thought-
Dennis is in that one.
See?
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay.
Oh, Glynis Nethercott and Gary
I saw
Nethercott,
Right.
Dennis.
and that's
That's not Dennis Naden, that's that.
that's Dennis there.
I don't think it is.
Have another look then.
All right. So what about the people that were involved in the support group then? Was there were there a number of different political organisations or people with different political persuasions involved?
I think there were people from not only the Labour Party.
Yeah.
There were people, SWP people. I think Danny was at those days. He's in the photo there,
Danny
and
Burton.
obviously Mum and Dad.
Militant. Yeah.
And there were people who I'm not sure may not have been in any particular party at all. I don't recall any Tories.
No.
I certainly don't.
Ron Nash would have been.
Yeah, I certainly
involved
don't.
at
Yeah,
all.
I certainly don't recall any Liberals either.
Really. Yeah.
But
So it's very much a Labour movement kind of driven
yes, yeah, oh yeah,
organisation.
as far as I can make out. I mean, yeah, the local Liberals around here. What's his name? Who used to live over by me. Forgotten his name now. It's gone right on the edge of with the cake salesman and biscuits. Bob Bicky, I took the mick out of him.
Pass.
Yeah, same here. And he
Were
doesn't live here anymore.
Were there any political conflicts within the group then, or was unity maintained?
Yes, I mean, I can't recall anybody sort of arguing to go to the barricades over something which we was or was not doing. Once it got rolling, it just seemed to develop a momentum of its own, I think. Everybody, I with hindsight, I must admit, I think consciously or subconsciously, most people realised the depth of the seriousness of what was actually going on. I mean, at this distance, 30 years, it's playing to Pike's staff.
Yeah.
But then,
Yeah.
when you had Thatcher, who obviously was looking for revenge over what had happened to the previous Tory administration, was it Heath, who had got turned over by the miners, that they'd been brewing that for a long time. I mean, when you hear the stories talking to the miners, you know, people who were at Orgrave, people who did spend their time travelling around picket line to picket line, yeah, exactly, and so on, and you hear the tale that it wasn't too bad with the police. They developed a kind of ritual. You pushed them about, they pushed you about, but a sort of thing. But then they said the atmosphere really changed when the Met Police turned up.
Right.
So, and over that, after that, the miners are absolutely convinced that not only was it various police forces, and the Met in particular, yet there were people wearing police uniforms who were from the armed forces. Because one miner swears blind that he was on a picket line here and all of a sudden he recognised his son over there, and his son was in the Coldstream Guards. Like, you know, and so on. So in those cases, I mean, it was another aspect of the sort of bitterness of which the various authorities were basically being given carte blanche to do what the hell they liked. But there again, when the book I was referring to earlier on, like Look Back in Anger, that one traces it back to the lessons of the national strike of 1926, and things that happened then reflected again in Nottingham, but also they draw attention to the role of government then and now. Very similar tactics employed then to put out black propaganda and all the rest of it against the mine workers and so on. Back in 1926, a person who played a leading role in all this was Winston Churchill, who later got rebranded as the saviour of us from Nazism. But at the time, way back then, well, after 26, but into the 30s, had actually been known to utter his admiration of Hitler, like, you know, and so on. So it was a lot of that was feeding through into the 84-85 strike.
Okay. All right. And what about the ending of the strike then? What was the impact of the ending of the strike?
I think for a lot of people, for the trade union movement in particular, it must have been the most demoralising thing, because this was arguably the biggest, most powerful trade union in the country. They had solid links with the RMT and the transport unions and all the rest of it. And but another parallel to the 1926 is how much serious intent there was amongst the TUC of the day then and the TUC of 84-85. There's some awful comparisons that actually do stand up to examination. That some of the trade union bigwigs, this was a bit too strong for their stomachs, like, you know, and they ducked and dived. And most of the miners, or the ex-miners of today, are quite convinced that they, Arthur Scargill wasn't wrong with when he said they've got a list of pits, 70 odd pits to close, and but of course he suffered the full vent of the anger of the black publicity, black, you know, and all the rest of it, and the usual tactics of trying to divide and conquer, like, you know. But they already had their backs to the wall in Nottingham in particular because of the other union that sprung up, the United, was it, the Union of Democratic Miners,
Workers,
like,
yeah.
which mirrored
Mm.
what had happened in the area back in 1926 with the Spencer effort, and so Nottingham in particular, that area had it really, really hard to keep the strike organised and so on. Miners from South Wales came and picketed up that way, and they were absolutely aghast because in South Wales it was total. Every man jack of every woman as well, of every pit was out. They didn't have the problems that Nottingham had, and neither over the border up in Durham and Northumberland and the Yorkshire coal field up that way. They didn't have the problems either. It just seems that there was something there amongst the section like that had hung on from all that time.
How did they strike you then, the miners from Nottingham? I mean, how did they strike you as people? They must have been quite strong, I guess, to stand up against the UDM and stuff.
Oh yeah. There were. I mean, I've there was all sorts really. I mean, we look at the photograph. I mean, none of them stand out as having two heads or anything like that. It's ordinary people in the street. But I think the reality, which they understood more than anybody else, was this wasn't just about jobs. This was about whole communities. This was about a way of life. This was about a way of ordinary working people being organised. I mean, I think they grasped that, whether they liked it or not, as that was what the game was about. Of course, unfortunately, in that area, there was an awful lot who never grasped that, and found themselves no better off at all, because their pits closed just as much as the ones who had fought, to preserve their jobs with the industry and their homes and communities.
Did the ending of the strike, did that have an impact on the local labour movement in Harlow, do you think?
Well, everybody was very disappointed, obviously, but towards the last 2-3 months, when it was seen that there was some falling away, that the numbers going back to work was increasing, there were these vehicles suddenly appearing, like armoured coaches with wire mesh over the windows. God knows where they come from. Someone must have knocked them up overnight. So that scabs, could be bussed into work almost, with police escorts and all the rest of it. Once that tide started to gather, and once again, for the lads in Nottinghamshire, they had already had people who would not and had not gone out, despite the union's call, and so on. And unfortunately, they was able to persuade some, to come out. But you had this faction then. It's quite a strong faction around that neck of the woods, who just never really joined the solidarity. And towards the last 2 or 3 months, then people, I think, did become demoralised, did understand or could see that they had reached the end of the road, and there wasn't going to be sort of a waving of the wand and everything would be all right, and that what they feared most was actually coming into being. And so given that, it wasn't surprising really that people did start to slide away like that. What was good though was when the strike was officially called off by the NUM, was the parades of miners with their banners, heads up, colliery bands, you know, defiantly, unbroken, marching back to work. Like, you know. I mean, that probably was one of the, or should be one of the great images of our time. Like, they think they won, but they never ever broke the spirit of an enormous number of them. And that's as true today as it was then, really.
What about?
Sounds a bit odd, but.
What about the legacy in Harlow? Do you think has there been a legacy of the strike and the support group? Do you think in Harlow? What was its legacy? Do you think?
I don't think there's ever been since. Might be wrong. I think we had the things down at East London there with the print and so on. That came afterwards, and a lot of people from Harlow went down there.
It was Frank O'Brien.
Yeah, Frank O'Brien was
probably got
involved with that.
pictures as well, Frank. Didn't he?
Was he involved in the minor support group as well then?
I can't remember,
Right.
but certainly on
The printers.
No, I'm not
the
sure.
print Murdoch thing down at Fortress Wapping. In fact, my daughter came down there on that with us as well. And but those things never had the full range of ingredients, really. I mean, the battle there was Fleet Street was no longer the heart of the print. It was going down to Wapping, where it had all been mechanised and God knows what else, and jobs were being lost. But it wasn't apparent that it was like a government determined to disseminate communities, like, you know, shops, houses, schools, whole communities, like, you know, employment, mines going, and with the full intent and purpose to do that. I think that's probably what triggered the really big support that came up in Harlow for the miners. I don't think those elements were present down at Wapping and such like, you know, or we ended up in Warrington once with the other print merchant, whose name escapes me now.
Shaw, is it?
That's the one, Eddie Shaw, yeah. And sitting in the road blocking, stopping the newspaper lorries getting out. Oh yeah. No, those disputes, I mean, they were serious, obviously, for the people who worked, like the Grunwicks and so forth. But the mining one was absolutely nasty to the core, and it was meant to be, because it was being driven by that government. And
Okay. Do you think, looking back on it now, that year in Harlow with the minor support group, how do you look back on it now? I mean, is it a source of pride of what happened that year?
it was encouraging for us basically in the Labour Party, certainly the people on the left, that we could actually do that.
Yeah.
And support fellow workers and so forth. I've got some vague feeling that we had something to do with Kent at one time as well, the Kent miners.
I think that my dad was saying that was at first the money was raised for the Kent miners,
Yes,
but the
because that was the
NUM,
nearest.
that's right, NUM then asked to support the Nottingham bit because they were under pressure.
That's right, because of the special circumstances of Nottingham, I think.
Can you tell us the name of the pit as well? Sorry.
Limby.
Limby.
Limby Colliery, just outside Hucknall.
Right.
Which is
right. So
south of Mansfield.
So it was one pit that the Harlow Support Group was, because there was some confusion about whether it was two pits or one pit.
No, Hucknall was the town.
Right.
And but funny enough, we have some
Judy's
photographs
got two
somewhere.
plates, one of Limby shutting and one of Hucknall shutting.
Well, perhaps it was two pits.
Right.
But I only ever sort of read, I mean, the name's registered, Limby and Hucknall, and I know we went to Hucknall town itself and tipped this stuff all over poor old Terry's allotment, but we've got a plate up here somewhere. We've got a Limby Colliery one.
No, because I think we gave it to Judy.
Oh, do we? Yes, right.
The other one.
But yeah, I mean, Hucknall was the town, and I understand that Limby was the colliery. It was about a quarter of a mile outside of the town, basically.
Okay.
But
Okay. But you've kept in touch with miners from that time.
No,
we haven't.
no,
You
well,
haven't.
no,
I'm sorry.
I mean, Howard and Julie.
Howard and Julie have. Sorry.
Particularly, because people have gone back and forth.
Yeah.
But once it was over and done with, I think that I mean, there were friendships formed, but I wasn't.
Well, we had a couple stay with us.
Oh, yeah, we had a
Just
couple.
to know who they were.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we had a couple come and stay.
I've only got their first names written down.
Okay.
Yeah, we had people come stay
And
with us.
nobody from the Limby pit that were there.
No, because remember,
What were
because
their
we was
names?
asking.
What were their names then? Do you remember?
No, I don't.
No.
It's a long time ago,
I
isn't it?
don't. Well, I've got it in the diary, but I've only got their first names,
Right,
you see,
right,
so...
yeah. Yeah.
We'll
But they
dig 'em
didn't
out for
think
you.
that they were from there. They thought they must have been from another
Ah,
area.
right.
So
Okay.
it
Yeah.
must have been mixed coaches that came down.
Well, they were saying that some miners from, I think he said some miners from Yorkshire came down as well.
Might well have done,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Might well
perhaps
have
it was
done.
them.
Yeah.
So much
I mean,
you never know who they were.
Yeah.
See, part of our weakness, like, is that when I was in the fire service and we had the national strike in sort of 76, 77, we kept a logbook,
Right.
but that was because I was in it. I don't believe anybody
Ah,
kept
right.
a detailed,
Yeah.
narrative.
Mm.
There may have been minutes, maybe there is minutes of meetings somewhere
Mm.
in the Labour Party archives or whatever, maybe even amongst SWP comrades or whatever. There may be, those things, but all I know is that I haven't got them right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you went up a couple of weeks ago for a 30th anniversary
Yes,
commemoration. Yeah.
was it 12th this
Sorry?
month? 12th of this month, was it? Yeah, it was. Saturday the 12th, wasn't it? We went up, took the caravan and that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure it was the 12th, it was the 30th
Yeah, that's
anniversary.
Thing from it,
Okay.
the official programme
Ah,
they
right.
call it.
Yeah,
But it was quite interesting
Yeah.
because there was a woman there who was,
so,
well, one of the main women, wasn't
Oh,
she?
right,
The-
yeah, one woman,
Oh, she was
Rosemary
just near to
Nesbitt.
tears. She could hardly talk, could she?
Yeah, she was
said
really
she
choked. I
rang
mean,
us
even
this
after all
day.
this time,
Mm.
like,
Mm.
and so on, and she was really quite devastated because
Well, a lot of
Um,
women were ill
Mm.
at that time. I mean, probably the men were as well. But
Right.
I mean, if you
Really?
read this book, this is really interesting.
Right.
This is the women's memories
Oh,
of the
wow.
strike.
Is that my tea over
And
there?
yes,
Is that from Nottinghamshire women, or is it just
Small,
I
a
don't
general
know. It
national?
must be all over.
Yeah.
I mean,